Hey, everybody, it's Rick. Welcome to Behind the Numbers with the Wilsons. Andrew will be joining me in about 1 second. There he is. Oh, there he is. Outstanding, outstanding. So, good morning, everybody. It's a Friday. We're going to try to start doing this every Friday. With so many other things, everybody's schedules are banging around like crazy. So, Behind the Numbers, everybody. We try to pull the curtain back a little bit on where we see the polling going in the country. And Andrew's one of the smartest guys out there about this stuff, luckily, because I was told there would be no math on this test. So, Andrew, let's talk for a minute about where you see Trump's overall approval right now, because that's really something people are going to ask us about no matter what we say.
So I think the story with Trump's overall approval right now is that it's slowly ticking down.
Right.
It hasn't been for a month. It hasn't really been this, drastic downfall that we saw sort of in the first 100 days.
The Elon crash.
Right. I would say that the earlier part of this term was a lot more devastating for Trump. And right now, things have sort of slowed. I wouldn't say he's hit a floor in terms of his approval, but
Right.
it is the speed at which his approval is falling has slowed somewhat. Although I will say, when the real impacts of the tariffs, I know we've been talking about this for months, when a lot of this, the economic, disaster that he's created really starts to hit, I think that you'll see that trickle turn into a flood again.
Yeah, I think that's right,
So
and I think we're going to end up with a much different political calculus when it is like undeniable that eggs are not cheaper and nothing is headed in the right direction, etc. Because
right,
he's had this
right,
little ability during the taco period here to dip up and down and say, oh, well, the market's crashed because I said something about tariffs, so I'll reverse it. The market goes up. And
right.
so people, I don't think, have had the ability to lock in on it as well as they will when it starts to really bite at Walmart and Target and the grocery store every day.
No, and unfortunately, I think Democrats are leaving a lot on the field. Trump is going to be able to scapegoat Congress, and he'll be able to scapegoat sort of these. Uh, I think part of the setup with he's attacking these companies that are saying they're going to have to raise prices, or
Right.
certain products aren't going to be available. I think the setup there is to scapegoat the companies and Congress and to say, it's not my fault the economy is crashing. It's these, it's everyone else who's really at fault here. So Democrats need to hop on this bad polling right now and really emphasize the fact that it's Trump doing it.
I do think that's something that, as in many cases, the Democrats have trouble converting. They have trouble getting up on the stoop to figure out when it's time to start, throwing the bombs at the wounded, at a wounded political party and a wounded political figure. Trump's numbers right now are upside down by roughly, I don't know,
52, I would say, disapproval.
Yeah.
Now
7
Fox
to
actually
8
had him a
or
little
6 to
higher.
8, maybe, depending on the poll.
Yeah.
Except for the outlier dipshit polls. Rasmussen's always like, Donald Trump is a 107% approval. Okay.
Ridiculous. But even
Right.
Fox News, I think, had him at 54 disapprove. So I think, he, even his most favorable
His diehards
outlets are saying, this stuff doesn't really work for us. And of course, Rupert Murdoch would not a fan of tariffs, I imagine.
No.
But
so let me ask you this. So a lot of people in the chat and a lot of people who have been pinging me messages have said, how does this affect 2026? And I think that's a viable thing to talk about. On the national level, the Republicans and the Democrats are still closely tied on people say who should be better in charge of government in 2027. They're pretty closely tied. Is that mostly because of the siloing of congressional districts now?
I think so. So
talk to us about that. I think people need to understand that.
The effect that you're talking about is the partisan sorting of Congress.
Right.
And this is especially true in the House. So right now, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but there's very few districts across the country that Trump won where Democrats hold a seat. And
Like
but
13 or
the
something.
reverse is, I think it's very small. The reverse is also true. So there's very few House districts where Trump lost where Republicans hold a seat. So the partisan sorting has arranged Congress to the point where there aren't these big overextensions from either party into districts where they won't perform well.
Right.
So the other problem is that Democrats are in the minority, but the minority is not as small as it has been in years like 2008, 1996, 2010,
Right.
when you saw these big shifts from party to party. So with a relatively large minority, a very well sorted Congress, you can't expect the House to turn into a blue wave, is the
Right.
essential point. Now, I do think that there is another argument out there that a lot of Republican incumbents are in more danger than the polling and the traditional political environment might indicate. So,
Say more about that.
there's I know this is going to sound sort of remote, but there was a mayoral election in Omaha with a 12-year Republican incumbent. Now, Omaha is a Democratic uh, sort of a stronghold, not necessarily. I mean, it's a light blue, I would say. But when incumbents of 12 years, regardless, I mean, this guy wasn't having any health issues, no big scandals,
Right.
it was a regular election for the most part. I do think as we progress through 2025 and we look at these other races, we'll have a better sense of whether or not we're going to see these massive shifts or something that's more like a sea change in the elections. But I do think Republican incumbents are in more danger than the partisan sorting argument would necessarily indicate.
Is that because Trump has a sort of pass with a lot of people? They sort of like price it into Trump's bullshit, where the Republicans are going to have to go defend this in town hall meetings and eventually on the campaign trail next fall, because they're not going to be able to hide and stay undercover for a year and a half. It's not going to work. So
no, and I think also the footwork required to say on the one hand that you are a conservative who wants to cut the budget,
right.
but also the House budget is so extreme that you could have grandma living at home next year. If
she's
you
moving.
really
I'm going to send her. I'm going to send her to live with you.
Great. Yeah, we have room. But I do think I think the Trump factor of it is priced in with a lot of people. People understand Trump. He's not opaque in any way. He's very clear.
No.
But I still think a lot of these swing voters put Trump in a totally different category than they do their elected Republicans. So yes, I would say that Trump's impact on the race for Republicans is overall going to be very negative.
Right.
But their own problem, this budget in particular, is I think going to be even worse for them.
So, and that really comes down to the fact, I think in large measure, it's not that Elon's getting a tax cut. It's that grandma's getting her Medicare, Medicaid cut, and that nursing homes and assisted living facilities and places that take care of seniors in this country are about, because there is a Medicare, $500 billion Medicare cut built into this bill, which triggers, they say it's not automatic, but it's such a low bar trigger that it means we're going to have $800 billion in Medicaid cuts and $500 billion in Medicare cuts. I think that is, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but what do you think? I think it's trickling down. I think that has trickled down to people more than a lot of other shitty things in this bill.
I mean, what they've changed is the eligibility. And I'm not an expert on Medicare, Medicaid, but if you put it in that context, when you change the eligibility, of course, people are going to lose direct benefits. But so losing direct benefits is the worst thing that you can do into an election year. And there were, just think back to the last election, there were still very many people citing Trump's COVID check as a good reason to vote for him. And there were a sizable portion of people out there maybe expecting to get another check. And they floated during Doge a check. So,
$5,000 Doge check. I remember that.
clearly Trump understands that direct benefits are, electorally great for him. Republicans don't seem to have the same calculus for whatever reason. It's baffling.
Well, I mean, look, I remember I had a conversation with a friend during the 2017 tax bill. This is one of the people that was literally in Mitch McConnell's like outer office planning the bill in the last, maneuvering. And I said, hey, dude, just tell me, and this is 2017, right? So I'm still like vaguely hopeful that the Republicans can come back from Trumpism and maybe this bill would have some middle class thing. And he goes, dude, my clients are hedge funds, private equity. They're going to get a great fucking tax cut. Everybody else will get a 2-year temporary tax cut, and that's about it. So the SALT benefits, the SALT tax deduction was taken out in the 2017 tax bill, sort of kind of put back in this one, but it doesn't look like it's going to survive in the House form. What do you think that does to some of these Northeast Republicans, the Nicolotas, the Lawlers, the Stefanics, the people in high tax Northeast states where there are probably 8 to a dozen Republicans that are going to be affected by the SALT thing, which really has pissed people off at a fundamental level?
Well, I don't think it's going to sweep them all away, but I do think like Mike Lawler, for example, is sort of in a precarious position.
Yeah,
Um, the 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 thing about any major change before an election,
Mhm.
when you are the party that is the sort of the agent of the negativity here that they're generating,
Right.
you're going to lose. Any party that is radical and in power, especially in the House, is going to have their most vulnerable candidates fall off the wayside, and those are in New York and the
Right.
Northeast. So any loss of direct benefits is going to be terrible. And the other thing is everybody says they want a tax cut. You pull anybody,
Sure.
it's going to be 90% say, yeah, of course I'd love a tax cut. And they don't, of course that's not in context of, that's only lasts for 2 years and all that. But the tax cut itself, people will like that. So it's something that Democrats are going to have to sort of counter. They're going to have to make sure that people understand that the loss of direct benefits is Republicans are responsible, but also they can't people won't discount the fact that they did get a tax cut. We can't leave that on the table. So we do
I
have to be
agree.
aware of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's
Um,
true. I think that's very true. Because there is a degree of folks even
oh,
who disagree with Trump and who don't like Trump, who will say, "Yeah, I'm a little better off because of this short-term sugar high on a tax rate," even though. Oh, well, actually, let me change the subject a little bit. The Democrats are very big right now on talking about the billionaire tax break, and I think it's legitimate. But do the numbers support that particular vector of attack, that particular class warfare idea? Because I'm not convinced the numbers are there, but I think you might know better than I.
I'm sorry, I lost you there for just a second. Let's
Oh,
go
okay.
back slightly.
What I was saying was, how effective is the message on the billionaires are getting tax cuts? How effective is that sort of class warfare angle in this case? I'm not convinced of it that it's like the best possible cut, but you might know more about it than I do.
Well, I think that the thing about billionaires is that a lot of people, and we know this from our research, don't put billionaires all in one bucket, right? Like they rate them as different personalities. So there's Mark Cuban, there's Elon Musk, there's
Sure.
Sergey Brin, there's Tim Cook. So they don't necessarily put billionaires they don't consider billionaires as a class. So for a lot of people, class warfare is not an effective messaging uh, strategy. Now, I do think that because of that insurgent part of the Democratic Party that's talking about it and
Right.
generating a lot of buzz, Bernie Sanders AOC,
Uh-huh.
I think that there is something for Democrats there with their own base and with a lot of working class people they can really, that can be a part of the coalition. And I think it's better than putting identity at the top of the coalition for Democrats.
Oh
For
God, yeah.
so many years we've had identity politics at the forefront where, policy and narrative should have been.
Right.
And I think just on principle, it's better to have something other than identity. So class warfare is probably better than what
Mhm.
they were, putting forth beforehand. So it may work, it may not. The elimination of Musk from the mix, I think complicates things. I will say, there could be something more with the sort of outright corruption, the Qatari jet situation.
Right.
I think, if you're going to talk about corruption and billionaires and crooked money, that is it right there.
Yeah, I think corruption is always a killer app, and I think people underscore it a lot, because the idea is that, oh, Trump is somehow getting one over on the Qataris, and he's doing this Bitcoin bullshit or meme coin bullshit. I think it's really, I think it really undercounts where Americans, they don't get those deals. They don't get those benefits. They don't get those special treatments by anybody ever. And I think that, Trump has shown he's for sale. You
Right.
pay him $1 million and you'll get a pardon. You give him $1.7 million and you get to show up at a terrible dinner, buy his Bitcoin, and you're gonna show up at that dinner. That shit looked like it was from a dumpster out behind a goddamn Golden Corral somewhere.
It's its own taste. So
Yeah.
I couldn't possibly. I think the flip of that is that there's a really sticky narrative, especially in American political conversation in general,
Right.
that everyone at the top is corrupt, and that was sort of perpetuated by of course you remember when congressman trading in stocks was the big corruption scandal of the day.
Oh yeah.
Not a palace in the sky.
Right.
So the thing to overcome is, voters will say that both Democrats and Republicans are corrupt, and maybe one party could be better at dealing with it than the other, but it's not, the divide is not massive. So what Democrats need to be doing is, again, less of the identity party and become the anti-corruption party. That would be a lane that a lot of Democrats could go down and
I think that's
be very
so
successful.
on point. I think that is so on point. I mean, we're starting to see that, like, David Jolly is talking about running for governor of Florida. One of the things he's talking to people about that I've heard is, like, how do you clean up Tallahassee? You think Florida's fucked up and broken? Yeah, it is. It's because this city where we live is guys, for the audience out there, there is no place in this country, there's no single square mile in this country more corrupt than the square mile around the capital of this state. So much money, billions of dollars are washing around in this town, and the state is fucked up because of that corruption. If you
Right.
make that a key state thing, I think you get a chance to reset. I think congressional folks, but Democrats, you got to kill the stock trading. You got to fucking stop stock trading. Democrats do it too. You got to stop it. If you're in Congress, your stuff goes into a blind trust. It's a simple thing any attorney can put together for you. You'll still make money in the market, but you won't
Absolutely.
have day-to-day control.
This is
And
the
it
thing,
is
right? Like any kind of corruption in any organization spreads like rot. So if it's at the
Yep.
top, it's going to go down. If it's pervasive at the bottom, it will go up. So the issue we have in Tallahassee is that there is corruption in the city government, and it spreads through the whole city into
Yep.
businesses and
then it
all
goes
kinds
up the
of public
chain to
work.
state government and
Right. So if Democrats in Congress, in the United States Congress, can choose to put their investments into a blind trust, that would be. I mean, if the party were to come together and say, this is what we're choosing to do as a unit. First of
Right.
all, showing unity as does the Democratic Party would just be
what a fucking
exactly
shocker
what
that would be.
It would be.
People would be like, wait, the demo what?
The Earth would be spinning in a different direction. But at the same time, that would be amazing. You know, it is possible, and you know, you're not going to lose if you put your money in a blind trust and put it in the hands of
in an index fund,
you're fine.
right?
So you know, it is if Democrats were to really pursue this anti-corruption idea, I think
Right.
that would be hugely beneficial, both in statewide and you know, state legislative races, and of course nationally. And it would be amazing, you know, if the future Democratic candidate, whoever that is in 2028, were to put anti-corruption at the very top of their platform, because it is so prevalent in our federal government right now. It is a real issue, and if you deal with the, you know, I think a lot of the problem with, you know, the palace in the sky, the jet from Qatar.
Yep.
I think it illustrates the problem that we have with Trump, is that corruption is not just in a vacuum. It is part of what he is doing to undermine democracy, and it's part of the problem that we have with losing our democratic way of life here.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and Evan Field just pointed out, you know, it would allow Democrats to get the moral high ground without seeming like ivory tower assholes, without doing the read my 700-page policy paper and then you'll understand why you should vote for me, peon. That shit has got to end. And look, I think that the idea of reform and cleaning up government is why some people, when they first heard about Doge, were like, oh, okay, that sounds kind of cool. Because look, everybody wants to reform government.
Right.
Literally, there is no constituency to not reform how government works. People, and I learned this years ago by a truly brilliant guy who was the Secretary of the Air Force. His name was Donald Rice. He had multiple PhDs, one of the smartest people I've ever worked with in my life. And he said, look, the fundamental thing is Americans know they need a government, but they want their government to be smaller and smarter and better. It's not that they just want to cut it. It's that they want it to be better.
Right.
And I think that idea of saying the corruption is what's costing you more, the corruption is why their taxes can't go down, the corruption is why people have lost confidence in the system. I think all that coming together in one electoral package for 26 and 28 is a really good, like, foundational underpinning for this situation.
I mean, it was one of the most effective weapons against Trump in 2020 was his corruption. And we know that from our research, that people by and large say that corruption and incompetence are the things that they're most concerned about with their elected officials. So it is still a salient, potent issue, but nobody's dealing with it. And, you know, for Democrats, if they were to come together and, you know, make this part of their, you know, their mission, starting with your own group is the best place to start. Like, if you know, if you are going to reform from within, you can make those reforms a reality.
Yeah, your credibility is up here at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and look, and a few Democrats in the House have been on this. AOC, to her credit, has been like, the stock trading shit has to go.
True.
She ain't wrong. There have actually been a couple Republicans who've done it, who said it too, which I'm going to give them credit for. But the narrative of Trump and this, like, handout all the time, gimme, 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 all the bullshit with the plane and with you know, Elon getting all these no bid contracts and all this, you know, and the Trump boys traveling the world to go sell golf courses for cash, all of this stuff. It's not going to get less prominent. It's going to get more. No. The Trumps are this is the best business the Trumps have ever had. This is the best thing they've ever done financially for their scamly. Oh,
nice. It works.
It works. And they know that the clock is running. They have 3.5 years left to milk the cow dry. So they're not going to stop. And I think there is a point after which even some Trump supporters say, all right, Chief, you know, enough is enough. You know, you're spending more time getting rich than you are helping America. And it does also offset something. that was a superpower of Trump in 2016, which I saw it in all those focus groups we did. Oh no, he's incorruptible. You can't buy Trump. He's too rich to buy Trump. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. As a friend of mine once said, I went to see this guy, a donor, in this fall of 2015. Went up to New York and I saw him. He's a big hedge fund guy, a name you would know, America. And I said, look, we've got to step in. We've got to beat Trump. You know, he's a billionaire. He could fund his own campaign. And the guy goes, whoa, 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 whoa. Trump is not a billionaire. He looks at himself, he goes, I am a billionaire many times over. Trump is a clown living on credit. Now, look, Trump has now achieved billionaire status because of all the Bitcoin shit and Trump media and all this other garbage. But for all that, I think he's given that image of being unbuyable away. I think he's fucked it up.
I mean, it's sort of ridiculous on its face because, I mean, rich people are famously known for making more money, wanting more money. That I think was a crazy argument to begin with, but at the same time, he clearly has enriched himself and his family, and clearly has that's why he ran in the first place. I think that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to not only get his name out there because he loves attention, but also rake in billions of dollars. And he ran away from his debt, ran away from the law. It all sort of comes back to his own personal corruption, and that's what happened to the Republican Party. The rot of Trump spread.
That's so right. You're so right.
This is what it all is. It's all about the corruption. That's really where we started to go wrong.
Yeah, I think for Democrats, that's a lesson to take away from this call, from this behind the numbers idea, folks, is that you will find that your focus groups will say to you, oh yeah, prescription drug coverage, or oh yeah, the things that get popped out of too many focus groups are not the right thing that moves the election. Because I promise you, last year, no one in a focus group got up in the morning and said, oh my God, we've got to stop these trans people. Trump made it an issue.
Right.
They spent $300+ million at the presidential, governor, Senate, congressional, and local and state race level saying that trans people were a danger to your children. It wasn't an issue, but they made it an issue. And I think the corruption actually is an issue and can be made into an issue.
Right.
So, if somebody if you're a Democratic candidate, one of your consultants says, we're going to lead on climate change. It's not that climate change isn't an important question. It's that it's not going to move the voters like corruption.
And it's you can put corruption into the context of what people care about. So, I mean, we know in polling that the wallet is the biggest, that comes before anything. If
absolutely,
economics precede politics in almost every way. So
always upstream.
If you say, the corruption at the top of the government is making you poor, which it is.
It is.
You can make that about people's own personal finances. So it's not disconnected from somebody's real life. You can really, that is an issue I think we could really be pushing.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Well, Andrew, good as always. You are on the ball. Thank you for your time today. We'll see you folks, I hope, again next Friday on this. And go give my granddaughter a kiss for me.
I will.
All right. See you, folks.
Bye.